Chapter 7, Life and Death. Present day. A trail of black goo stained the ice and guided Lumina's way to the relic. On her journey to the centipede pit, she put together a plan to confront the creature, subdue it, and talk and persuade and pry what she needed out of the machine. It involved a series of transmat beams and an elaborate light show provided by the Lunadream's laser. Her breath fogged her visor, but the heads-up display cut through the condensation enough for her to program the ship's systems. Her stake gun and transmat beacons clicked against her side with each step. As she trekked across the ice under the afternoon sun, she realized that once she got down there her carefully laid scheme to force its cooperation was doomed to fail. The puddles of black blood only increased in frequency and size as she neared the pit. If she approached the wounded machine with hostility, after it had retreated into a corner to recover, it would fight her until one of them ended up dead. Lumina reached the edge of the pit and stared down into darkness. She took a deep breath, sat down on the ice, and examined her options. Only one presented itself, the memory spell. Before she left the Lunadream, a series of words and symbols flashed into her mind's eye, and compelled her to write. So she sat down with a datapad and a stylus, and let the words flow from her while in a trance. The entire time, Lumina fought doubt, disbelief, and the urge to control the words spewing onto the datapad. But she didn't, and when she finished, she held in her hooves 5 pages outlining a spell she had never seen before. It was a memory restoration spell just as Twilight promised her.
Okay, Twilight, you win.
Lumina shrugged off her stake gun and all her gear.
We'll do this with magic.
She peeked over the edge of the pit and backed away. Underneath her spacesuit she was sweating and her heart was thumping. With a shake of her head, she deleted her programs for the laser show barrage, and brought up her notes for the memory spell on her heads-up display. She sat on the ice and studied every detail of it until she had the casting process memorized. How exactly she was going to get close enough to the centipede to cast it, she didn't know. Lumina would figure that part out as she went along. Keeping a healthy distance away from the edge, she fastened herself into the rope line left behind during her first expedition and tested the cable. Deep breath in, deep breath out. Lumina approached at the edge of the pit and counted to 3.
1, 2, 3.
On 3 she dove into blackness. Darkness surrounded her and the little atmosphere outside howled over the hole, and came screeching down the walls at Lumina. It was terrifying. She was terrified. But she resisted the urge to bottle up her emotions or succumb to them, instead she allowed herself to experience the fear and move on. Once Lumina's hooves hit bottom, she unfastened her suit from the rope and surveyed the alien corridor. Still dark, still twisted in design, and still just as creepy as she remembered. Lumina checked the readings on her heads-up display for an atmosphere. It reported habitable conditions, just as before. She took a deep breath in, and pulled her helmet off. Lumina inhaled through her nose, savoring the purest air she ever breathed, and exhaled through her mouth. She stared at the faint blue light reflecting off the corridor in front of her.
Twilight, Celestia, I know you two are going to help with this next part,
Lumina said. Magic trickled in through her horn. When she reached the entrance to the cathedral hall, she put her hoof down in more of that black goo, and the stuff stuck to the boot of her suit. She tried to scrape it off, but without success.
Hello, I just want to talk, I'm not here to hurt you.
Lumina called out at the pillars and scanned them for any sign of movement.
If you can understand me, then please just hear me out for a second. I have a really good friend back on my ship and he's dying. His name is Animus, he's an AI like you, and he needs a new body. I know you have spares.
Lumina stopped right there. The tapping of needles on metal advanced on her right. When she spun to face the source, red light struck down not 3 centimeters from her nose. The heat singed Lumina's face but she leapt to her left before it got any closer. She scrambled to her hoofs and galloped into the forest of pillars. A bolt of red light soared over Lumina's head and collided into the pillar ahead of her with a shattering boom. Debris pelted her, and each stone fragment delivered pain. Lumina glanced over her shoulder for just long enough to catch the centipede charging up behind her and the blender in its maw whirling to life. Lumina rounded the corner of the pillar to her right and continued on through the forest weaving and zigzagging. Where she was running to, she didn't know, but if she slowed even for an instant it would get her. She panted, her eyes struggled in the dim light, and at a gallop her hooves drummed up a cacophony. The centipede was at home in the darkness, did not tire, and moved in silence beneath Lumina's hoof falls. Lumina pushed those thoughts out of her head and didn't allow herself to feel the terror the place and the monster invoked. She just ran. Metal pincers lashed out at Lumina and caught her hind leg. She collapsed in pain, gasping. A beeper on her suit sounded. It already started patching the tear and applying first aid to the wet, burning spot on her leg. She spun her head around in time to watch the centipede close in on her. Gritting her teeth together, Lumina put her good leg to use and kicked the machine square in its eye. It shrieked and recoiled. Adrenaline carried Lumina back to her hooves and around the next pillar. She continued through the pillars a short distance, then turned around, and stopped. If she didn't end this right here and now, it would only be a matter of time before the centipede either impaled her, or gunned her down with that red beam. The machine arced around the pillar and rushed at Lumina head-on. Instead of running, she called out to the magic pulsing through her, and she molded it around a single thought.
Enough!
Lumina shouted back at the machine.
Stop it!
She stomped her front hooves and projected the spell out of her horn. Golden light surged forward and wrapped itself around the metal centipede, and there it stopped. Lumina allowed herself to catch her breath. The golden aura held the machine captured mid-motion. The golden light cut through the darkness and lit up the pillars surrounding them. Lumina's eyes darted up to her horn, found the same golden aura, and then aimed right back at the centipede. Her face lit up with glee, her heart fluttered in joy, and Lumina burst out laughing.
I did it!
Lumina shouted.
It worked! It actually worked!
In this state Lumina could rip that monster apart limb by limb and make it pay for what it did to her. For a moment she considered it, but she never did. Lumina let herself experience that anger, and let it go. As it vanished, so did the thoughts of wrath. Lumina approached the machine and touched her horn to its head. She performed Twilight's spell exactly as the instructions stated. The magic flowed up her spine, out her horn, and into the centipede's body. It tingled and reverberated between the machine and Lumina. She pulled her head away, and when she did, the centipede clattered on the floor as limp as a ragdoll. The centipede remained motionless on the ground, even after she prodded it with a hoof. When her body realized the danger had passed, her heartbeat slowed, and the adrenaline coursing through her cooled. Pain shot through Lumina's leg, first as a twinge, and then as a stabbing pulse. Lumina staggered and fell to the floor. She flipped over on her side and examined the tear in her suit with a hoof-mounted lead. Blood stained the edge of a long scar in the fabric, and she felt something hot and sticky dribbling down the inside of her legging. When Lumina tried to put weight on the leg, the pain shot through her tenfold. A scream escaped Lumina's lips. No way she was walking out of there. Rolled over on her back, she stared up at the latticework and followed an individual strand of metal weave in and out. She flicked a pebble at the centipede, but that didn't even get it to twitch.
Well, Twilight, what happens next?
Lumina asked the ceiling.
Or is this it? I get this far just to screw up the spell and kill the bucking guardian, and die of starvation or infection or any number of things down here.
Lumina closed her eyes and meditated on the magic streaming into her. Something white flashed just behind her eyes, and then the answer came, no. Shrieking bellowed out of the centipede and broke Lumina's concentration. She rolled over and watched the centipede writhing and coiling, each twist echoing as it hammered into the floor. Then the machine half retreated into darkness, just before it rushed forward. Lumina tried to scoot away from the enraged metal beast, but it was on top of her in seconds. Its legs clamped down around her, caging her in. The machine sandwiched her between its carapace and the floor. Lumina pressed the side of her face into the floor in an attempt to escape the maw of steel lowering to her head. Its red eye fixed on her and drowned out Lumina's sight.
Please, Lumina said. I have a friend, and he needs your help. He will die without a replacement body. Please, you've got to help. I know you have a vault filled with blank machines and any of those will work.
The red light waved back and forth, up and down.
I'm sorry for hurting you and invading your building.
Lumina squinted her eyes but couldn't penetrate the glare.
I know you don't really like me, but I need your help, because without you, my friend dies.
She didn't know if it was something she said, or if the centipede's memory returned and it remembered some repressed love for organic life, but the red light cut out and the centipede peeled away from Lumina. She sighed and pulled herself up as much as her leg allowed. The centipede crept along the floor towards some place deeper into hall. Using the centipede as support, Lumina picked herself up on her 3 good legs, and hobbled along beside it.
Where are you taking me?
She asked. The centipede didn't even so much as twitch in response. After about 10 minutes of agony, the centipede stopped and directed its red light to the floor. Lumina watched the machine work from behind the cover of a nearby pillar. Air spurted out in a ring around a depression in the floor to reveal a staircase leading below the floor. The centipede slithered down the staircase and, having decided it would be better to face whatever awaited her than stay in the relic alone, Lumina hobbled along right behind. There wasn't any light down there. The LED lights on Lumina's suit cut through just enough of the darkness to provide her with a view of some walls and the centipede's rear end. And the stairs sucked. A lot. They were never built with a pony in mind, they were too close together, and forced Lumina to use her wounded leg. She hissed each step of the way.
If you can understand me, please at least make some effort to talk.
Lumina put her hooves down on flat ground and continued on.
I mean, I know you're intelligent, and I think you can understand me, so why not try to communicate?
It didn't even let out a peep.
So, do you have a name?
Lumina shrugged and forced a smile.
You must have a name, or at least something I can call you other than machine and centipede. She tapped her chin. If you don't have a name, would you mind if I give you one? How about something like Old Blender Face?
The centipede stopped and curled its front section over its back, and aimed that red light right at Lumina. It bellowed, shrieked, and clicked in her face before curling back over. She decided to shut up after that. Blue light flashed up and down a high ceiling, and when the lights finally stabilized, they cut through the obsidian walls to Lumina's right and left. She jumped back and her heart pounded. Centipede models flanked Lumina on both sides, just beyond the clear obsidian. Lumina waited for herself to calm down, and then started inspecting the machines. She spied tripods 5 times her height further down, and some machines that walked on 6 legs and hunkered close to the ground like a beetle, others were black and silver replicas of the winged bipeds that created them. None of them matched Animus.
Do you got any more?
Lumina asked.
I don't want to sound picky, but I don't think any of these are a good fit for my friend. They don't match his personality, and I don't want to put him in something he's going to hate for the rest of his life.
The centipede tapped down the hallway and Lumina tried her best to keep up, but after a minute, she spotted something that demanded her attention. Propped up like an action figure in a display case was a dragon, with metal armor for scales and myomer for muscles. Lumina had seen pictures of dragons in her storybook, but the eyes and wavy horns on the machine gave the impression of something far wiser. Erect on 2 feet, the dragon stood about 1.5 meters tall. It had an entire head over Lumina. Its golden wings extended out twice that length.
That one.
Lumina tapped on the obsidian wall.
It's perfect.
Air spurted out and the tubes and various bits of packaging sloughed off the dragon. The centipede fought its way back around itself and Lumina stepped out of its way. Without opening the case, it crawled up the side, and reached through the obsidian and retrieved it with its many legs. In one fluid motion, the centipede curled over itself and accelerated down the hallway toward Lumina. She gasped, and hobbled away from it as fast as her legs allowed, but she lost her footing on her 3rd step. She landed on her face with a smack. The centipede curled over her as Lumina stared up at 1,000 needles writhing above her. Before Lumina could stand or protest, the centipede grappled onto her with all of those little legs and just slung her over its back. Lumina guessed what would happen next, and tried to find a good hoof-hold in the centipede's carapace to grapple onto, but before she secured herself the machine rocketed through the hallway and up the stairs and around the rows of pillars all the way out of the cathedral forest. Lumina hugged the centipede's back for dear life. But she never fell, in fact, the centipede propelled itself along without so much as jostling her. The machine soared down the long and dark corridor, and in a matter of seconds they arrived at the hole leading to the outside world. Sunlight shone in and graced them with the golden hues of sunset. The machine only paused once, just long enough for Lumina to put on her helmet, and then it reached for the hole and shot out like a bullet from a rifle barrel. It did this all with Lumina on its back and Animus's new body in its front legs. In minutes they reached the Luna Dream's exterior hull. Lumina climbed up to the centipede's head and pointed in the direction of a nearby airlock. Using the console on her foreleg, Lumina queued up the door controls and guided the machine inside. Once they reached the AI core, the centipede could start pulling Animus out of the auxiliary computers and into his new body, assuming the centipede decided to help. Lumina couldn't say with any degree of certainty why it followed her into the ship, or if it intended on helping. On the other side of the airlock, Lumina removed her helmet and pressed onward to the AI core, and sure enough, the machine followed. When Lumina looked down at her leg, little red droplets dribbled from the stain in her suit. She took a deep breath, ripped her eyes from the sight, and put one hoof in front of the other.
Come on, the core is this way.
Lumina waved the centipede on, and together they pressed forward. They rode the hyperlift as far as the damage to the Lunadream allowed, from there they continued on hoof. Lumina made it on her own for about 10 meters before the pain in her leg forced her to stop.
Wait, I need a second.
Lumina leaned into the wall for support and hung her head.
Just give me a minute and I'll be good to go.
The centipede didn't wait. Without warning, it picked her up and slung her over its back as it had before, and carried her the rest of the way. Lumina yelled stop once they reached the doors to the AI core. She started squeezing past the doors, but the centipede reached through with its many legs and pried the doors apart with a thud. She scrambled for the crowbar, picked it up in her mouth, and lifted up the plate leading to Animus's auxiliary systems. For one brief moment, she placed all 4 of her hooves on the floor, and it hurt like hell to put any weight on that back leg. Over her shoulder, Lumina spied the centipede scanning the remains of Animus's quantum processor with its red light.
He's over here.
Lumina spat out the crowbar and let it clatter on the floor.
He's down there in another computer, you'll need everything tagged under Animus.
The centipede didn't wait for her to finish. It laid down the dragon and zipped down the hole in the floor. Lumina peered down but saw nothing but the centipede's black, shining, metal carapace. A minute later it was out of the hole, with wires embedded in its head and a long probe extending from its maw. Without hesitating, it plunged the probe into the dragon's eye. Smoke puffed, it smelled worse than a chemical fire. And that was it, the centipede retracted the probe and backed away. Motionless, the dragon stared up at nothing. Lumina poked its side and tried calling Animus's name, but no reaction, no words, no movement, not even a flicker of light, answered her calls.
That wasn't it, was it? Please tell me there's more you're going to do.
Lumina barked at the centipede.
Why isn't he awake yet? What's wrong with him?
She nudged the thing out of the way and dropped down on her belly. She slapped the dragon's face and even poked it in the eye, but it didn't move.
Come, Animus, wake up.
She put her hooves on its shoulders and shook the dragon until its head rolled over to one side.
Wake up, you have to wake up. There is so much more ahead of us, you can't die now. Don't just stand there, give me a hoof.
Lumina whirled around at the centipede and flung out her front hooves.
Do something. I'm not losing him now. Not like this. Not after all we've done.
The centipede watched from across the room with its red eye. Lumina shook her head, and turned back to the body in her hooves. She tried everything from holding its claws to slapping the dragon in the face, but it remained still. She hung her head and whimpered.
Please, Animus, wake up.
Lumina leaned in and wrapped her front legs around the robot.
You're the only friend I have left, I just don't know if I can do this without you. I need you to wake up.
Lumina hugged the machine closer and held it. For how long, she didn't know, but at the end of a very long time the mouth on the dragon creaked open. She propped herself up on her front hooves and watched its unlit eyes fill with an aquamarine light. Her ears perked up and her eyes widened as the jaw twitched open and closed.
As you command.
Her friend's voice leaped out of the dragon's mouth. Tears rolled down Lumina's cheeks, she sniffled and gave Animus another hug.
I was so afraid I was going to lose you again, she said. I don't know what I would have done if that happened. I am aware that I am no longer installed in the Lunadream, said Animus. This platform is much smaller and I am having difficulty adjusting to its architecture. This is not of pony construction. You don't want to know what I had to go through to get that body.
Animus pivoted forward into a sitting position, he spotted the great metal centipede in the corner of the room and raised his eyebrows in astonishment. He looked back over at Lumina to put a question to her, but instead he paused, noticed the tears running down her face. His eyes found the blood leaking from the stain in her suit.
Lumina, you are crying, he said. You must be in a great deal of pain. I insist that we get you to sickbay immediately.
Lumina rubbed the tears from her eyes, and more trickled out.
I'm not going to lie, it hurts a lot, but that's not why I'm crying. I'm not crying because I'm sad, or because I'm in pain. I'm crying because I'm happy.
She chuckled through the tears.
I must need you much more than I think if I sound that cheesy after a week by myself. I believe I owe you a debt that I can never repay. The events that you endured to acquire this body must have been physically and mentally demanding. Thank you. Well, you didn't just expect me to give up on you, did you?
Lumina let her face light up in a smile.
And you're welcome.
Animus flexed his hind legs, then leaned his body forward and attempted to stand. He didn't get it the first time, nor the second, but on the third try he succeeded in finding his feet. Lumina and the centipede just watched.
You got it?
Lumina asked.
I have never had limbs before.
Animus put one foot forward, and then the other. His arms shot out to his sides to help him balance.
Using them is proving difficult. Your injuries require medical attention. I will accompany you to sick bay and provide whatever assistance I can.
Lumina gathered her legs underneath her torso, and pushed up to stand. In the process, she put more weight on that back leg than she intended and hot fluid ran down her side. She hissed. The pain was excruciating.
I think I can make it to sick bay.
Lumina hobbled over to the exit with the centipede following.
When you've figured out how to walk, meet me there. I'm going to go lock myself in the medipod now.
Limping down to sickbay took her longer than she expected. The energy and adrenaline that fueled her during the fight and the trek to retrieve Animus's new body just wasn't in her anymore. She was almost done, and her body knew it. It fought her the entire way down. The centipede followed her every step of the way. Why? She didn't know, and at that point she didn't care. In sickbay, Lumina yanked off her spacesuit, taking special care not to peel away any of her lacerated skin. As soon as she pulled her wounded leg free of the suit that had been applying first aid and pressure to the wound, blood flowed out. It was a mess. Blood pooled up in her suit and left stains all over her white coat and gushed onto the metallic floor. She was beginning to feel extremely lightheaded.
I forgive you for this,
she told the centipede,
but this fucking stings.
Lumina threw herself in the medipod, and just closed her eyes while the plexiglass dome closed over her and the machine went to work. She gestured at holographic buttons with her horn as they popped up around her. Sweet-tasting gases filled the inside of the chamber and dulled the pain in her leg. A hub of mechanical arms lowered, and she turned her head away before it went to work. The centipede pulled itself away from the plexiglass dome and started scanning a stray prescription bottle right as Lumina looked away. Every now and again, Lumina glanced a squinted eye at her leg, and saw nothing but busy mechanical arms and medical tubing coursing with fluids of every color. She felt nothing more than a slight pressure on her leg. An foreful of blood was inserted into her forehoof, and in minutes the light-headed feeling started to vanish. Animus stumbled into the sickbay some time later. He bumbled up to the medipod and tapped a claw against the dome.
How are you feeling?
He asked.
The pain's gone,
Lumina said.
The medipod is patching me up pretty well, I don't think it will even leave a scar.
A buzzer sounded, and the holograms in front of Lumina's face flashed green. The hub of mechanical arms retracted into a panel at the end of the medipod's bed. A fresh thermal regeneration bandage was wrapped around Lumina's leg, and when she flexed it and tried to put weight on it, Lumina was met with only the mildest of pain. Lumina popped open the medipod dome and stepped out on all fours.
Not exactly good as new, but nothing I can't handle.
Lumina tested her leg a little more.
Now that I'm bandaged up, and you're in a body, we need to talk about our next move. We need to leave this planet, but before we can, there is something we need to do first. There's an alien ruin not too far from here, and in it there's a device that will terraform this planet and let it support life again. We need to get the Lunadream in shape to fly again, go back down to the ruin, and turn that device on. I have detected a local network.
Animus put a claw to his head, and the lights in his eyes flashed.
Please stand by while I search it for relevant data.
The centipede scurried up to Animus and shone its light in his face. Animus's eyes darted back and forth in his head. He broke from the trance and the centipede switched its light off.
Well, what did you find?
Lumina climbed back into the medipod and lied down on her stomach. She was still really weak.
I do not wish to alarm you, but it appears that your associate has already activated the device. When did you do that?
Lumina asked the centipede.
Never mind.
She shook her head.
Isn't that good news? Lumina, I may no longer be inside the ship, but I am still connected to it, he said. The Lunadream sustained heavy damage when it impacted the planet. Judging by the data streaming in from the local network, the entire terraforming process will occur rapidly. The ship barely survived landing. I do not believe that the Lunadream will survive the rebirth of this planet. It couldn't have waited a little while. The Guardian has waited millions upon millions of years to begin terraforming.
Animus tried to articulate with his claws, but he couldn't get the gestures quite right.
She will not wait another day. How long do we have until the device, starts up?
Lumina held back her panic. Animus glanced over at the centipede, and then back at Lumina.
I don't believe we have any more than 14 hours, said Animus. Assuming the data I am receiving is correct.
A glass of water sat out on a countertop across the room. Magic returned to her in a fierce vibration through her horn. She focused in on the glass and started weaving magic over its sides.
Then we'll just have to move the ship before daybreak tomorrow, she said. The ship's engines are not designed to provide us with sufficient thrust to escape atmosphere even at full strength.
Animus tapped his foot.
What is your plan for moving a 1.2 kilometer long starship?
Lumina reached out to the cup with her magic, and although it didn't obey her as easily as it did during the fight in the ruin, with a great deal of focus, the cup lifted up off the counter and floated across the room to her. Animus ducked his head, and glanced to and fro at the golden aura surrounding both Lumina's horn and the cup. She set the cup down beside her on the bed.
I'm going to do it with magic, said Lumina, just as I did with the cup. Will that work? It's got to.
Lumina looked Animus right in the eye.
If it doesn't, the Luna Dream sinks into the ocean and us along with it.
30th of winter season, 10,056 AC.
Attention Pegasus Fleet, this is the FTL freighter Luna Dream, we are on an errand of mercy delivering medical supplies to the planet Arian.
Lumina angled her head over the microphone on her command console.
According to Article 12 of the Treaty of Equus, you are required to grant our request to make orbit. Firing on an unarmed, civilian FTL freighter is a Class 3 war crime. Tell your ships to stand down.
A hologram displaying the planet Arian and the Pegasi blockade popped up in front of Lumina's face. Her hooves dragged and dropped holograms in the air, and with a gesture of her horn, she toggled through her list of pre-programmed commands. Outside the bridge window, the blue-green planet glowed like a shining gemstone in the light. The vents surrounding her blew cool air on her face.
Any response from the Pegasus fleet?
Lumina asked Animus.
The Pegasi have not responded,
he said from out of the speakers surrounding her.
Their gunships are maintaining a target lock but have not opened fire. I am standing by with electronic countermeasures. Get ready to use them if they decide to fire.
Lumina traced a line from the hologram of the Luna Dream to the shadow of Arian's moon with her horn.
I've plotted a course behind the moon, we can hide there and try to slingshot out of the system if this all goes bad. Message from the Pegasi fleet. Patch them through.
The console next to Lumina beeped.
This is Commander Typhoon of Task Force 6.
The voice of a Pegasus no pony, wanted to hear raised at them barked out of the speakers.
Your arrival was not anticipated by the Praetor, however, as per the treaty you are cleared to enter orbit to provide medical supplies. You are granted 36 hours and then you must break orbit, and you must adhere to all civilian ship regulations. Failure to depart within 36 hours or to obey our regulations will result in your immediate termination. Have I made myself clear? Crystal clear,
Lumina said into the microphone.
I wanted to ask, do your regulations say anything about shore leave? You see, I've been stuck on this ship for 5 months and, I was promised a little bit of time to stretch my legs. Lumina, what are you doing?
Animus asked.
Arian is under martial law. I do not recommend making planet fall.
She killed the switch on the microphone.
I'm going to find my mother. Commander Typhoon to Luna Dream, please respond. This is the Luna Dream.
Lumina flicked the microphone back on.
You are permitted to land, but you must return to your ship and break orbit in 36 hours. I am forwarding a list of additional regulations for you to follow while you are planet-side. Typhoon out.
The speakers beeped, and Lumina dismissed the holograms surrounding her. She swiped a button with her hoof and her command chair flung to the back of the bridge.
I'm going down there, Animus, and there's nothing you or any pony else can do to talk me out of it.
Lumina bit the release strap on HR safety harness and bolted off her chair and out of the bridge.
I was not going to attempt to stop you.
His voice followed her from room to room and into the hyperlift.
Given the conditions on the planet, I highly recommend that we maintain constant radio contact. I will be able to provide you with intelligence and keep a transmat lock on you at all times. Can you do that through the earbud on my datapad?
Lumina stopped the hyperlift at her quarters.
I'll need something inconspicuous. Yes, that will provide me with a sufficient target. I have checked over the regulations the Pegasus fleet provided and there are no regulations that prohibits transmat as long as you beam down at a starport for check-in.
Lumina dashed into her room and slipped into her Interstellar Express denim flight jack and dumped her data pad into her saddlebags. She threw on her saddlebags, crammed the earbuds into her ears, and straightened the badges on her jacket. A quick hyperlift ride later, and she was standing on the transmat panel in Station D2.
Okay, Animus, I'm ready.
Lumina straightened out her jacket and put her hooves together at attention.
Commencing transmat,
he whispered. Yellow light enveloped Lumina, and with a crackle and a snap and a burning sensation, the white walls of the Luna Dream vanished and overcast skies took their place. Tainted winds swept through her golden-yellow mane. The glimmering towers of Aryan City were no longer crystals illuminated with the lights of thousands of offices and homes, but obsidian shards, unlit and pounded into cruel shapes. Rubble and debris bled out of craters and broken points. Gunships hovered in and above the clouds, while soldiers clad in powered armor roamed the streets and rooftops. A gunship swooped in low from overhead, shaking the ground beneath Lumina's hooves. This was not the Aryan Lumina remembered. Lumina approached a watchtower guarded by Pegasi in shining blue-powered armor. The microfusion thrusters on their legs and wings hissed and burned, and the high-powered assault rifles mounted on their shoulders followed their gaze. A Pegasus in a leather officer's cuirass nodded at Lumina.
You must be the pilot from Luna Dream, I was told that we'd be expecting you.
The officer scrolled through a hologram above his table.
Gee, what gave it away?
Lumina pulled at the name tag on her flight jacket. The officer squinted at her.
While on Aryan, you will be required to adhere to all regulations and orders put to you by members of the Pegasus Imperial Military. Is that clear? Yes, sir.
Lumina feigned a salute.
I hope you're not trying to impersonate an officer,
he said.
That's a crime with a very public and corporeal sentence.
The hologram in front of him flashed green.
All right, Miss Spectre, you're checked in and may proceed into the city. Curfew is in 5 hours. Make sure you're indoors before then.
Lumina cantered off past the checkpoint and into city. A short distance away, she found the tram. During the ride, Animus whispered what information he could dig up about her mother, which didn't amount to much. The Aryan datasphere fractured under the Pegasi occupation, and Animus struggled to find anything at all.
I'll try her apartment first,
Lumina whispered to him.
If I don't find her there, then maybe I'll find some clue about wherever she is now. Can the transmat take multiple ponies up right now, or do you need to reconfigure it? Yes, however taking a pony, off-world in this manner violates several of the regulations. I don't care, I'm not leaving my mother here to rot another day. Not again. As you command.
The tram let Lumina off a block from her mother's old apartment building. The top half of the tower was missing, but little lights inside flickered. Ponies still called the derelict home. Lumina paused, and grasped her chest. The place just beneath her heart, and right above her stomach, clamped into a tight ball. On her way down the street, Lumina spotted a powered armor squad keeping watch on the roof of an office building. She paused as just then an Earth pony, more of a filly than a mare, marched out of the alley with a gun mounted on her shoulder.
For Aryan.
The Earth pony chomped down on the firing bit, and at that instant every hair on Lumina's body stood up, and 2 of the armored Pegasi tumbled off the roof. Tight-stream electro-magnetic pulse weapons were something Lumina had only read about but never seen in real life. They fried electronics, disabled vehicles, and swatted powered armor units out of the sky at the speed of light, without making a sound or flash. The Pegasi squad didn't stand a chance. The 2 Pegasi that fell from the roof never fired their thrusters to slow their fall. Their armor locked up and they tumbled through the air with all the grace of gargoyles ejected from their place. Their heads cracked against concrete. The rest of the squad stood fixed and unmoving.
Lumina. Status. Electromagnetic interference.
Animus's voice gave way to static before cutting out entirely. 1 powered armor Pegasus escaped the beam, and in an instant he descended down the side of the building, and skied across the ground on the glare of microfusion thrusters. Adrenaline surged through Lumina, but her legs couldn't decide whether to run or to hide. She stared at the oncoming Pegasus unblinking. Rifle fire cackled in the air.
Move.
A brown stallion shoved Lumina out of the way of the Pegasus.
Come on. This way.
The stallion galloped down the street, and Lumina followed with her head low and her ears tucked flat against her head. They hurried into the apartment building, and slammed the door behind them. Save for the moment, Lumina caught her breath while her rescuer peeked out of boarded-up windows. He was an earth pony, with a brown coat and hyper-vigilant orange eyes, and a posture as if he spent his entire life running and hiding.
Are you okay?
He asked.
Yes, I think I'm fine.
Lumina patted herself down for bullet wounds.
Wait.
He backed away from the window and looked Lumina up and down.
It's you. You came back. Do I know you from somewhere?
He laughed.
Yeah, Lumina, it's me, Miss Nova. We used to hang out all the time in school, remember?
He was the right age, color, and his voice was familiar. He even smelled like Miss Nova. Lumina's eyes widened. That was Miss Nova. Why didn't she put that together sooner? She was about to laugh with glee, but then she realized why she hadn't recognized him. Miss Nova was a Pegasus.
What happened to you?
Lumina stepped around to his side and ran a hoof down his back. No wings, not even a bump or bone that hinted that they were once there.
Oh, those.
Miss Nova stared down at the ground.
I had a biosculptor remove them when the invaders started rounding up Pegasi. They may not like unicorns and earth ponies, but they hate Pegasi born outside of the Empire. They called us traitors to our tribe. I'm fine though, it's not like wings were that useful anyway. They were only useful for grabbing stuff, and looking good.
Lumina pulled Miss Nova close.
It's so good to see you again, said Lumina. It looks like every pony has been to hell and back. I'm just glad to see one friendly face. Lumina, what is your status?
Animus whispered to her.
Please respond. What's that?
Miss Nova asked.
Nothing, just my ship's computer, hold on one sec.
Lumina let go of Miss Nova and pressed her earbud with a hoof.
Well, not great, Animus. I just watched the Pegasi mobile infantry gun down an earth pony, after she T-semped 2 of them out of the sky. It was the most brutal thing I've ever seen. Are you damaged? Do you wish for me to engage the transmat beam? No, I'm not ready to come up yet,
Lumina said.
I'm just about to find my mother. Very well. I will begin sending our cargo down. The transmat beam will be unavailable for the next 40 minutes. Alright, I know how to reach you. I'll call if I need anything.
Lumina put her hoof down and turned her attention back to Miss Nova.
So you're with the Interstellar Express now?
Said Miss Nova.
That's, I would never have guessed you would end up as a pilot. What brings you here? When I heard that Arian needed medical supplies, and the Express was going to try to make a run here, I volunteered for the job.
Lumina glanced down at her hooves.
I'm here looking for my mother. Do you know if she's still living here? I'm sorry but she left.
Miss Nova's words cut through Lumina.
AFTL ferry showed up here about 2 years ago on a diplomatic errand. Your mother, she somehow secured transport off-world with the diplomats. I know she spent every bit she owned to do it, but I can only pass on what I heard through, let's just call them my sources, and I can't say with any degree of certainty where she went. I'm so sorry, Lumina.
She slumped down to the floor, too shocked to react any way else.
Lumina, you have my most sincerest apologies, Animus whispered. If your objective is no longer on the planet, I advise returning to the ship immediately. What are your next orders? I don't know, Animus, I don't know what I'm going to do,
Lumina said aloud.
Hey, I know something we can do.
Miss Nova extended a hoof to Lumina.
My wretched excuse for a tribe hasn't stamped all the life out of Arian. Come on, I'll show you where the ponies are always welcoming and the cider never runs dry.
Lumina took Miss Nova's hoof and pulled herself up.
Thank you,
Lumina said. With that, Lumina and Miss Nova left the fractured apartment building and ventured into the downtown district. The sun never set. The clouds overhead obscured its descent, but the gray sky just darkened into black and a low orange glow. A short tram ride later, the two arrived at the famous Café Rarity. Somehow, it had escaped a lot of the abuse most of the buildings in Arian City endured. Its neon sign and its signature red carpet were just as brilliant as she remembered. Lumina had never been inside. Oh no, that was a place where only the most important of ponies gathered, but she had seen it on holocast. Every pony on Arian had. Café Rarity was a cultural icon. Miss Nova trotted inside, but turned back when he realized his companion never crossed the threshold.
What is it, Lumina?
He asked.
Oh, it's nothing, it's just I never thought I'd actually get to go inside this place. Not after I left, at least. Come on in.
Miss Nova held the door open for Lumina.
I'll get you the best lavender tort you've ever had.
Inside, it smelled like coffee and fresh flowers. Ponies that refused to let the dirt and chaos of the occupation break their noble demeanor milled about, with their chins high and their posture strong. Near the front of the cafe, a pair of unicorns in bow ties blew into trumpets fixed to stands. Before Miss Nova and Lumina even grabbed a table, the stallion behind the counter called out to him.
Hey, Mist, what will it be? The usual.
He balanced a plate on his head and slid it onto the countertop.
Oh, and great job out there today. Maybe now we can finally get things done around here. I hope so,
said Miss Nova.
Actually, tonight, I think that my guest and I will each have a cup of coffee and a slice of your lavender tort.
Then he turned to Lumina and added,
if that's what you would like, of course. That sounds excellent.
The pony, behind the counter, got their orders up in a hurry, and insisted that the house covered their tab. Miss Nova grabbed their serving tray and led them around the back of the cafe to a loft up the stairs. They got a table overlooking the cafe, and for a moment, they sat there sipping coffee, enjoying their torts, and watching the fancy ponies eat, drink, and banter.
You know, you've really grown a lot since I last saw you, and I don't just mean that you look taller.
Lumina finished her tort and pushed her plate back with a hoof.
You're a lot more confident. The awkward young stallion I used to hang out with after school didn't invite me out for dessert at the fanciest cafe on ARan.
Miss Nova blushed and turned his head down at his plate. There, a little hint of the Miss Nova she remembered surfaced.
Thank you, I like to think that not all of what I've been through has changed me for the worse.
He slurped down the last of his coffee.
Well, are you going to tell me why the stallion working the counter is covering our tab? Are you some kind of VIP now?
Lumina straightened herself up, and tried to make eye contact without success.
VI? What? Very important pony. VIP. I don't really want to talk about it.
Miss Nova kept his eyes down, and the blush disappeared.
Yeah, you do, or else you wouldn't have brought me here. You're showing off. You're trying to impress me and it's working.
Miss Nova met Lumina's eyes, but just for a second. He sighed, and pushed his empty coffee cup around on the saucer.
You remember that weapon, the one that disabled the powered armor squad? You see, I make them. I was there to see if it would work.
Lumina didn't say anything.
We all have to do our part for the resistance, if we're going to survive, and life isn't easy here, not since you left, we're dying in droves out here. We have to kick them off of ARan, and I found a way to do it, with spare parts, that's the tricky part. And I get paid well for it, too. Can we talk about something else? I'd like to hear about how you ended up flying an FTL ferry. Yeah, sure.
Lumina cleared her throat.
I wanted to come back here, and the only way I'd be able to do that was either by raising a mountain of credits, or by joining the Interstellar Express. When I got to New Canterlot, I started training myself to fly shuttles and the basics of stellar cartography. By the time I graduated from general schooling, I had the ideal resume for an FTL pilot.
Miss Nova never met Lumina's eyes. He squirmed in his seat, and he stared out over the loft without speaking.
Is something wrong?
Lumina flashed back to that awkward time in her life when she was somewhere between a mare and filly, when she, more than anything else, wanted more than a friend out of the stallion sitting across from her. The idea of him upset at her was enough to stop her heart.
Yes, there is something wrong.
He glanced up at Lumina.
You got off this rock, you're the only one in our school, neighborhood, the only pony, I knew that did.
The things that happened to me, the choices I made to survive, I didn't have a say in any of them. Not if I wanted to live.
You could have been anything you wanted to be,
he said.
You could have built bridges, or been a doctor, or a super cool scientist. Instead you chose to spend your life looking for a way back here? You took your choice, and you decided to come back, to this place? I'm sorry, but isn't this a waste of your potential? Just who do you think you are judging me?
Lumina propped herself up on her front hooves and gazed right down at Miss Nova.
You, on your high pedestal, want to tell me about poor life choices? I watched a filly today take one of your guns and kill 2 Pegasi, right before they opened fire on her. You make things that kill and you're going to sit there and tell me I've picked the wrong path. You weren't here.
This time Miss Nova met her gaze, and his eyes were watering.
You left. You weren't here when they invaded Aryan City, or when they spirited away all the Pegasi I ever knew off-world to get re-educated. We never heard back from any of them.
He swallowed, bit his lower lip, and continued.
All this time I've been thinking, thanks Celestia Lumina is spared from this. You don't know what it's like. I had to cut off my own.
Mist Nova gestured to the place behind his shoulder blades.
That's what it takes to live here, he said. That's what you left behind. That's what you were spared from. And that's what you spent your life trying to come back to.
Lumina backed down into her seat. She yanked the earbud from her ear and set it on the table. For a long moment neither Mist Nova nor Lumina said anything. They watched the ponies below them gather into a crowd around the trumpet duet. She recognized the song, Moonlight Serenade, she believed it was called.
You know, I really don't like crowds, or big parties for that matter,
Lumina said.
There was only one reason why I wanted to go with you to the gala all those years ago.
Lumina and Mist Nova found each other's eyes.
I'm really sorry I said all that just now,
Lumina said.
I was out of line. It's fine,
he said.
I shouldn't have brought it up.
Lumina reached over the table, and put a hoof on Mist Nova's shoulder, and the two smiled at each other.
I missed you quite a bit,
Mist Nova said. With that, Lumina got up out of her stool, walked around the table, and hugged Mist Nova.
I missed you too.
He put a hoof on Lumina's back. After a moment, Lumina pulled herself away from Mist Nova and dragged her stool around the side of the table, and sat herself down to his right. The trumpet duet down below continued playing its sad, sweet, song. Lumina and Mist Nova exchanged a smile, and the two bantered and talked as only old friends could, well into the night. They swapped stories and laughed and talked about nothing in particular until the last of the fancy ponies departed, and the band packed up and left. Mist Nova glanced at a clock and jumped out of his chair.
Wow, is curfew really in 45 minutes?
He said.
I can't believe we spent so much time here. Anyway, I need to get going back to my apartment.
Mist Nova paused and tapped his front hooves together before continuing.
If you need a place to stay, I could, if you want, of course, but you could spend the night at, my place.
When Lumina looked at Mist Nova, she didn't see an arms dealer scarred by tough choices, she still saw the cold that stole her heart. In her mind was a perfect vision of how the evening would turn out, and she had wanted it for so long that she was more than willing to overlook unpleasant details, such as the T-Semp gun, their argument earlier, and the occupation, to make it happen. Lumina giggled like a school filly, and told him, yes. They fled the warmth and light of the cafe, and took to the cover night. Instead of going directly to Mist Nova's home, they meandered through the streets and hoof paths illuminated by only the occasional lamppost. The night air was cool, but in the company of each other, neither minded at all. A short time later they arrived at a place where the sea and city met. Lumina recognized the place the instant she stepped off the trail into the expansive public garden. Mist Nova had taken her to the very spot where she met her mom for the first time after her parents divorced. The cobblestone paths, Somerset trees, and the rolling hills of turf still managed to remain unmarred. Though the buildings across the bay were shattered, lights still shone from their windows. Lumina stood up on her hind legs and threw her free hooves over the railing and looked out over the sapphire sea. Mist Nova joined her at the railing, right as a sliver of moonlight poked out from behind the clouds. The wind carried the scent of the ocean and there wasn't a single Pegasi gunship or trooper in sight.
I'm surprised this is still so intact,
Lumina said.
You know, right after my parents split up, I was worried I was never going to see my mother again. My dad and I met her for the first time after the divorce at that park bench, that one over there, and right then I was the most relieved and happiest little filly on Aryan.
She never took her eyes off the water and her face faded.
I'm happy I got to bring you back here.
Mist Nova scooted closer to Lumina.
I'm sorry, about what I said earlier. Well, I'm actually really glad I got to run into you again. I didn't mean what I said, I've just been under a lot of stress, as you can imagine. You don't have any idea how hard it was leaving, she said. I left behind everything I ever knew. I traded my home, my friends, my mother, and you, for a gilded stalactite in a cave. It's been tough, and now that I'm back it's not at all what I expected.
Turning away from the water with her ears popped up, Lumina put a hoof on Mist Nova's shoulder.
You should come with me. You'll never have a better opportunity to leave this place. I can't do that.
Mist Nova dropped off the railing and met Lumina's eyes.
Despite everything that's happened during the occupation, my place is here, and the resistance needs me if we're going to have a fighting chance. We can do this. We can retake our world. Once we drive the Pegasus Empire from Arian, we can rebuild it how it was all those years ago. Exactly how we remembered it.
When Lumina glanced back at the moon, she picked out the outline of a massive troop carrier from behind the clouds, and she realized that the moonlight reflecting off the water was nothing more than the glare of its engines.
How many gunships are in Arian City?
A cool breeze kicked at Lumina's mane and tail.
Last I counted, 3 wolf pack flotillas, each about 4 strong,
he said.
So about 12 at any time, but that doesn't count the carriers and the fleet in orbit, or all the soldiers on the ground. Why?
The idea of staying there felt wrong. All wrong. Lumina looked down at her hooves, and for the first time admitted to herself that her future with Miss Nova didn't extend past that evening.
I can't stay.
Lumina couldn't look at Miss Nova, and as she spoke, she kept her eyes on the sea.
When I look out at the water, I want so badly to see something that isn't there. I can't exactly explain why, but no matter how painful the memories of leaving are, the thought of staying any longer just feels worse somehow.
Miss Nova shuffled around on his hooves, huffed out a puff of mist, and glanced over his shoulder.
You aren't still mad about earlier, are you?
He asked.
No, you were right about all that, I wasn't supposed to come back here.
Lumina climbed down off the railing and kissed Miss Nova on the cheek, and backed away.
I'm sorry, I am, but I have to go now.
Miss Nova's ears flopped down, and he raised a hoof to touch his cheek. The air nipped at Lumina's face and legs, and the glare of the troop carrier started retreating back behind the clouds.
This is the last I'm going to see of you, isn't it?
He asked.
I'm sorry.
She backed down the path.
Maybe it will work out better for us in the next life, yeah. Maybe.
Lumina turned around and marched down the path without looking back. She ducked behind a tree beside the trail and plugged Animus back into her ear, then called for an immediate transmat. Asterisk. Asterisk. How long Lumina sat in the transmat station, she didn't know. After a time, she slipped off her saddlebags, ripped the Interstellar Express jacket from her torso, and let it fall to the floor.
How did it go with your friend, Lumina?
Asked Animus.
Was the desert good and the air refreshing? No, it didn't turn out at all as I hoped.
She walked out of the transmat station, and down the hall.
Inform the Pegasi fleet that our mission is complete, and that we're leaving. After that, plot a course out of this system and make our first jump to Unitopia. We still have a package we need to pick up and deliver to New Canterlot. The sooner we get started on that the better. As you command.
Lumina relocated to one of the couches on the observation deck, and watched her world shrink into the star field. She sat there in the dark for several hours, before Animus called and broke the silence.
Do you wish to discuss it?
He asked.
I shouldn't have gone down there and I shouldn't have taken this assignment.
Lumina rolled over on her back and stretched her legs out.
What was I expecting, for my life to pick up right where it left off? I had this fantasy and I wanted it to come true so badly, I wasn't thinking about whether or not it was actually good for me. I am sorry to hear that your evening did not go as you had hoped.
Lumina stared up at the ceiling and rested a hoof over her eyes.
Animus, I think I'm going to quit my job, she said. Did your time on Arian have anything to do with this decision?
Animus asked.
It has everything to do with this choice. I spent my life searching for a way back, and maybe Miss Nova was right, maybe the whole pilot thing isn't what I'm supposed to do with myself. Nothing is predestined, Lumina. I'm not talking about destiny, I'm talking about finding my own path for once. Something I care about that also has some sense of purpose. My mom gave up her seat on the last shuttle off of Arian so I could have a life and make what I wanted out of myself, not deliver cargo. Do you know what I mean?
Animus went quiet. The Lunadream encountered a stray gas pocket, most likely atmosphere vented from the hull of some unfortunate spacecraft. The ship rocked to one side.
What about me?
Animus asked.
I am a part of the ship. I am unable to quit. It was just a thought,
Lumina said.
I'm not leaving you behind, not now and not ever. You're one of the few friends I have left. I'm not losing you.